Ladies and gentlemen, good day and welcome to the Q1 FY22 earnings conference call of HDFC Life Insurance Company Limited. As a reminder, all participant lines will be in the listen-only mode, and there will be an opportunity for you to ask questions after the presentation concludes. Should you need assistance during the conference call, please signal an operator by pressing star then 0 on your touchtone phone. Please note that this conference is being recorded. I now hand the conference call over to Mr. Vibha Padalkar, MD and CEO, HDFC Life. Thank you, and over to you, ma'am.
Thank you so much. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the discussion on our results for the quarter ended June 30th, 2021. At the outset, I must apologize for the delay, which was due to our AGM being slightly longer than what was anticipated. Our results, including the investor presentation, press release, and regulatory disclosures, are already available on our website as well as that of the stock exchanges. I have with me Suresh Badami, Executive Director, Neeraj Shah, CFO, Srinivasan Parthasarathy, Chief Actuary, Ishwari Murugan, our Appointed Actuary, and Kunal Jain from Investor Relations. I will run through the key highlights of our Q1 FY22 results and would be happy to take questions post that. With signs of the second wave receding, we have seen a gradual pickup in economic activity across parts of the country starting June. We are expecting a continuing revival with easing of lockdown restrictions and extensive vaccination drive, and are hopeful that the severity of future incidences would be lower than what we have seen so far. Moving on to our business performance. We saw business disruption during the second wave of COVID. While the economic restrictions were fewer and also more localized as compared to the first wave, the health impact was a lot more devastating this time round across our country. Against this backdrop, we recorded a 22% growth and a market share of 17.8% in terms of individual WRP in Q1 FY22. Given that the trends have varied by region and the possibility of future waves cannot be ruled out, we will continue to be more segmented and localized in our approach, taking one quarter at a time. Our product mix continues to remain balanced with non-par policies at 32%, protection and annuity at 8% and 5% respectively, participating products at 29% and ULIPs at 27%. Our annuity business saw strong growth of 61% vis-a-vis Q1 FY21. We continue to address the long-term opportunity in protection in a calibrated manner and remain confident about the medium to long-term prospects of protection in India. We saw a pickup in credit protect business on the back of higher disbursements, registering a growth of 204% in Q1 FY22. Moving on to our claims experience. In the quarter gone by, we witnessed a steep rise in death claims with peak claims in wave 2 at around 3 to 4 times of the peak claims volumes in first wave. We paid over 70,000 claims in Q1. The gross and net claims provided for amounted to rupees 1598 crores and rupees 956 crores respectively. It appears that claims on individual business have peaked in June and expect them to normalize in the coming months with more people getting vaccinated and a fall in absolute number of infections. While this wave has been steeper, it has been shorter as compared to the first wave. Based on our current claims experience, we have provided for an additional reserve of rupees 700 crores to service the claims intimations expected to be received across our individual and group businesses. Group claims tend to have a higher lag as compared to individual claims, and we remain watchful of emerging trends. Our continued approach would be to review the adequacy of this reserve at periodic intervals based on actual experience. At a broader level, we will monitor overall mortality claims in excess of our estimates rather than segregating claims based on cause of death. We endeavor to promptly settle every bona fide claim. The strength of our balance sheet and backbook surplus has enabled us to absorb the shock of heightened claims whilst continuing to deliver growth. Moving on to other financial metrics. In comparison to Q1 of last fiscal, the company saw higher renewal collections with 13-month persistency improving from 87% to 90%. We expect this trend to continue for the rest of the year. Our new business margin stands at 26.8% for the quarter, higher than 24.3% delivered in Q1 last year and 26.1% in full year FY21, with value of new business at rupees 408 crore, a growth of 40% over last year. This has been achieved on the back of growth across channels and a balanced product portfolio. Our normalized operating return on embedded value, i.e. before factoring in the one-time mortality reserve creation, stands at 16.5% as against 15.8% in Q1 FY21. Our profit after tax stands at rupees 302 crore, 33% lower than Q1 FY21 on the back of higher claims reserving. Our solvency position remains healthy at 203%. Turning to channel and product performance. Our banker channel grew by 16% based on individual APE, with robust growth being recorded across most of our corporate agency partners. We've also seen an upswing in face-to-face channels. Agency channel grew by 49% compared to the previous year. We are witnessing a gradual increase in branch walk-ins that aid our direct channel and continue to see improving trends in our online channels as well. We are proud to announce the addition of ICICI Securities and TVS Credit as our bancassurance partners. Next, on our response to COVID-19. The pandemic has impacted lives across the world. For organizations like us, it has been a test of our resilience and agility to adapt to the ever-evolving situation. In the interest of the health and safety of our employees, we at HDFC Life started a program to facilitate the vaccination for our employees and their families. A majority of our employees are in the 18 to 45 years age group, and our endeavor is to get all of them vaccinated as soon as possible. More than 60% of our employees have received at least one dose. We have also undertaken various other initiatives like adopting a work-from-home model, introducing new digital platforms for sales and service. Through our tie-up with medical service providers, we have been offering ICU at home in certain geographies, doctor on-call services, oxygen concentrators, emotional and mental assistance helpline, medicines and lab tests at discounts, amongst other initiatives. We also provided financial assistance to our employees in case of medical exigency of self or a family member. We have embarked on our integrated reporting journey to articulate our approach to long-term value creation and sustainable growth. Our annual report, integrated report and ESG report are available on our website. To conclude, we see greater customer engagement and an increased interest in life insurance policies, with the concept of human life value gaining relevance. Additionally, we have also seen an increasing adoption of digital services by customers. We are not still out of the woods and hence will continue to maintain a cautiously optimistic stance. I would like to reiterate our focus on surpassing industry new business growth and delivering an upward trajectory on new business margins while adhering to a robust risk management approach. In the end, we would like to extend our sincere gratitude to our employees, partners, and other stakeholders who have worked relentlessly during these trying times to provide best-in-class service to our customers, and also thank IRDAI for their continued support. The detailed disclosure on our results is available in our investor presentation. We wish you and families a safe and healthy time ahead. We're happy to take questions now.
Thank you very much. We will now begin the question and answer session. Anyone who wishes to ask a question, please press star and 1 on the touchtone telephone. If you wish to remove yourself from the question queue, you may press star and 2. Participants are requested to use handsets while asking a question. Ladies and gentlemen, we will wait for a moment while the question queue assembles. The first question is from the line of Suresh Ganapathy from Macquarie. Please go ahead.
Yeah, hi. Thanks. Vibha, I have just 3 quick questions. First, a quick number clarification. The 5.5 billion impact on EV net of that 1.65 that you have taken, right? I mean, you had already provided for, right?
Yes, that's correct. So out of that 1.65, we had some leftover. So out of 165 crores, we had about 69 crores leftover, Suresh.
Okay, you still have another 69 crores left over.
Yeah, unutilized, yes.
And then on top of that, you have provided another 7 billion.
Well, the 7 billion subsumes the 69.
Oh, 7 billion subsumes the 69.
Yeah.
Oh, that's clear. Now, Vibha, don't get me wrong on this, but when we had specifically asked at the end of fourth quarter that is 1.65 billion adequate, of course, nobody would have anticipated the COVID wave and, second wave could be so lethal. But unfortunately, the eventual impact has been almost 3-4 times more than what you had anticipated. How sure that this 7 billion now takes into account all possible claims? You may be still having a lot of things in the pipeline. I understand some of these things come with a lag. Are you confident that this time around the 7 billion is adequate?
I think so, because what we have done is the statistical modeling of deaths in India, the regions where that has happened, so down at a state and even further granular level, whatever data is available, we have done that and then mapped that to our customer base and what is the shape of the curve. And that's why in my opening comments I mentioned that the shape of the curve this time, Suresh, is that it is certainly thicker, but it is shorter. As against more prolonged. And so we believe that the deaths, the peak was I think on the 23rd of May, that will start resulting into claims, but will peter out maybe by the end of August with that kind of a lag. And that's really how we are seeing it pan out. And also, to give you a sense, we have touched about 300 claims a day. That is progressively going down sub 200 very, very steadily on a day, and we track this on a daily basis, and we can see that decline in a steady manner. But having said that, with any projections, whether it is actuarial projections or claims projections, it is ultimately a projection. But at this point in time, we have actually erred on the side of caution. That's the other point I also made on group claims, that it does take group claims typically take us a little bit longer to be registered as, and so there's some bit of caution there. It might happen, might not happen, but right now we believe that this is a reasonably cautious amount of claim that we have set up.
Okay.
Srini, do you want to add anything in case I've missed out?
Yeah, just one point I just wanted to add. Suresh, when we set aside 165 crores back in April, that was for like the claims already occurred as of 31st of March, and any sort of spillovers from March is what we were providing for. And like Vibha mentioned, after 165, we are still left with 69 crores from that. So we couldn't anticipate what was going to hit us in the month of May, because the month of May was really fatal from a claims perspective. And what we are now setting aside is for, again, the kind of, whatever happened, because there is a little bit of a reporting delay that comes in. So whatever has happened thus far as of 30th of June is what we are setting aside. Now, if there is something that's going to hit us 2 months down the line, another wave hitting us and all that we are unable to foresee. So hence, what we set aside last quarter was based on what we knew then. And like I said, we are still left over with 69 crores of that 165 amount. Now, based on what we now know, we set aside 700. But if there is something that's going to hit us in September, October, that we don't know.
Okay, that's very clear, helpful. Now, just quickly 2 questions. One is on the reinsurance guys. How are these guys viewing this? Because obviously, unfortunately, they are taking the bulk of the pain. Are there any negotiations being carried out from a pricing perspective there? And secondly, or rather the final question is, in general, the protection demand, if you were to look at it, individual protection is down 4%. Now, I understand the longer term potential, but Vibha, we need to be really careful about the tail risk going into the smaller cities and centers. So is it a demand issue? Is it a supply side issue? We are hearing a lot of these life insurance companies curtailing group term insurance and all those stuff and being very reluctant. I just want your stance on that. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is a area that we have been cautious right from the beginning, as you know. And 2-3 parts to this. The first one is on individual protection. And it's something that we've been saying that what the formula that worked, or the DNA of the customer that worked in what we were seeing in cities and salaried customers in metros versus interior, there was a deterioration in claims experience. And all of what I'm saying is before COVID. So nothing to do with COVID. Even without COVID, we were seeing a deterioration, and we were very, very careful in having additional checks and risk-based underwriting rather than one-size-fits-all underwriting. So you're absolutely right, Suresh, that one has to be extremely careful. That is number one. Number two is that, to your point on reinsurers, they have a hypothesis, they have checks that are required, and we have to ensure that once we agree to a certain level of underwriting, we have to get it done. Because post facto, if we as insurers just do something else, then they would have the right to say, sorry, but I'm not going to honor these claims. So largely, it has to be in sync. It has to be done jointly. It cannot be that it will be a very short-term approach to say, you know what, my book is reinsured, because it's a partnership. That's the second point. Third point is we've always stayed away from group term insurance unless we really understand the counterparty very well and we feel comfortable with it, because the pricing tends to be extremely fine. So it has unfortunately become a fairly commoditized product, and we have not been successful in making money there, because even one additional death can really throw your pricing out of gear. So we have largely stayed away from that, and it can suddenly be a large hit in terms of employees of one corporate or even in a non-employer-employee relationship. And the fourth is on credit life. On credit life also, there can often be a race to the bottom in terms of price cutting, and one has to see whether pricing versus what is the underlying mortality experience, and does it fit within our risk framework, and be okay to say no, it doesn't make sense for me at this point in time, and maybe we'll come back at a later stage. And MFI experience could be very different from some other NBFC experience, and so on. So I've always maintained this, that growing protection isn't very difficult, but making reasonable returns in protection is fairly difficult. And that's where I think it's possible, but it will happen slowly. And that's where I think a calibrated risk, an underwriting model, calibrated way of growing it, and the percentage in my mind is 15-20%. As against this undue focus on what is protection as a percentage of it was 8% last quarter, the pressure for it to become 10% this quarter, and so on. I think one has to really stay away from those kind of pressures or temptations to just grow that very rapidly.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, in order to ensure that the management is able to address questions from all participants, please limit your questions to 2 per participant. If you have a follow-up question, you may rejoin the queue. The next question is from the line of Arav Sangai from V2 Capital. Please go ahead.
Yeah. Hi, good evening, ma'am. Hope all well at your end. So I had few questions. My first question was around the claims that we have received. The majority of the claims, are we seeing a deterioration in the group part of it or the retail part of it?
So right now we're seeing it in the retail part of it.
Right. So, ma'am,
of group, yeah. It's not that group is completely immune from what is happening overall in the country. There is deterioration in group as well, but right now we are seeing an acceleration of individual claims.
Right. So, ma'am, in the some of the disclosures you have mentioned that we have almost expected that the claims have peaked out. So the 700 crore that we have made, is it keeping a reasonable amount of cushion, or we are more than certain that this might get utilized? Just a qualitative percentage, if you could share, or any details on it, just to give us some kind of assurance that we might not see any negative surprise going ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I mentioned to Suresh earlier, we have erred on the side of caution.
Ma'am, one last question I had was on the retail protection trajectory and the GTI business as a whole. So, we have been pretty cautious about this, and I think for the past 3 or 4 calls, we have been pretty cautious about retail protection. So, since the wave 2 is kind of coming to an end, and how do we see the demand or supply picking up here? Are we still being cautious here, or do we see that maybe in the next few months we might get active here? That's the first part. And second part, ma'am, like on GTI, you mentioned that we have never been making money in this particular segment, but in the industry, we have been hearing that some players are getting very aggressive in this. So just wanted to understand, is it that they are satisfied with less profits on this business, or they do some kind of different things that, which we are not able to undertake or which we are not satisfied to do?
So on the first question, we do believe that there is an opportunity in protection. We are so underinsured as a country. There is a renewed awareness about the need for pure protection thanks to the pandemic. So, our approach remains calibrated. It remains wherever we are able to understand the DNA of the prospective customer and what fits into our risk appetite, we will cover. But at the same time, we will also walk away or defer where we think that underwriting right now is not possible, or medical tests are not possible, or there's always a case when somebody else is willing to underwrite, and that's okay. Because these are all long tenured products, and we'll really come to know only down the line. But is there an opportunity? There is an opportunity. Is it going to be meteoric? That's where we will be cautious. To your second question on GTI, we have always remained calibrated in that because of the very fine pricing, like I mentioned to you, and also the situation wherein a few worsening of a little bit of mortality experience can pretty much wipe out everything. And there is next to no underwriting there in terms of medical. There is at higher covers, but otherwise you're underwriting somewhat in the blind, and you're underwriting on the basis of some past performance that might have been with some other insurer. And it's often bid out, and there is a race to the bottom. So in that kind of a situation, we've always stayed away. So we write next to nothing in terms of GTI business.
Right. Understood, ma'am. That's it from my end. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next question is from the line of Shreya Shivani from CLSA. Please go ahead.
Hi, this is Adarsh. Couple of questions. One is the VNB walk chart that we have. The mix of business has broadly remained same between 1Q last year and this year, and margins have ticked up versus 1Q. Is that because 1Q last year would have had weaker protection because of repricing that's kind of rebased, and hence that's the margin uptick we see?
Hi, Adarsh. Yeah, and also you'll remember that first quarter did not have next to nothing in terms of credit life. So that has come back with over 200% growth. So that also helps.
Got it.
And of course there is repricing also. These are the 2-3 reasons why annuity is another reason, the 61% growth that I talked about.
Got it. Second is again this protection thing, and you kind of already spoken about it. One of the things is clearly that the underwriters or reinsurers are also tightening up norms, right? They increase price and now tightening norms. I just want to understand, when they tighten norms, it broadly means somebody or they are little more, their asking rate of what they want to underwrite has changed, and that eats into the population side, right? So I just wanted to the dynamic, because on one side I would think a pandemic does make people to go and buy health or protection businesses, policies. And on the other side, you have a supply side issue of person wanting to tighten underwriting, and even the companies, right? So does it shrink the population set a little bit, whom you want to underwrite, or the system wants to underwrite, but underwriters are now very sure that they don't want to do that business? What's happening on ground on that?
Adarsh, I think more than shrinking, I think it just makes the whole process more realistic. This is not a over the table, issue it in 2 seconds, 2 minutes, what you call it. So, at a certain risk profile with some checks, a large population will get some kind of cover. But the realistic word I've used is that, maybe some more medical tests are required, maybe some more KYC and financial documentation is required. Maybe a rate up might happen. Maybe the sum assured might be lesser than what they originally started off with. Maybe some other forms of cover might be more suitable than just a very high term cover. So that is a more sustainable way of looking at it than just sign up something over the counter with no checks. We were getting into that mode as a sector just before the pandemic hit because term suddenly became the new kid on the block. And I think I've said this at least on 3 calls that, that is not in our view, at least high sum assured, that's not how it's going to be sustainable. Yes, low ticket, low sum assured over the counter, that's fine. Or a PMJJBY, and you're talking about 200,000, 400,000, but it can't be for 1 crore kind of a cover. So it'll just evolve hopefully to being more realistic from both ends. What are we asking for? What is the expectation of the customer, and so on.
In any sense, Vibha, of what's the kind of business being weeded out given the higher asking rate of reinsurers?
Some obvious ones are wherein there are comorbidities, there is a non-disclosure which can get detected if someone goes for a medical test, or somebody is overinsured, and we do use data such as IIV data and say that what you need to show me more of income generation for a justification of such a high cover. Those sorts of more, I think, peripheral fringe cases will certainly get weeded out very quickly. And that is good, because the last thing we want to do is not pay claims. We would rather philosophically just say no to such business upfront.
Got it. And my last question, Vibha, is through last few years been quite innovative and got new products, scaled up those products, and they are relatively better margin products than what the other products used to be, the older savings product. Now, at the end of the day, these are commodities, right? There is a guarantee involved in some, or there is a bonus involved in some. So just wanted to understand what gives the comfort on margin protection in these businesses over a medium term.
So the way it works is a couple of things. One is first mover advantage of being the innovator, and that's something that HDFC Life has consistently been. And so that segment is associated. So rarely will somebody buy a product of the contours of Sanchay Plus without evaluating Sanchay Plus. I'm not saying that they will always buy Sanchay Plus, but certainly there is no struggle to be called to being part of the consideration set, and then it just increases your chances manyfold of getting picked. Second is that it's not, especially post-pandemic, it's increasingly becoming lesser of an IRR or a lowest pricing on term mindset, which is also a good progression and a good way of looking at insurance and not bargain hunting on insurance. Third is that various other things, so for example, how we use analytics to ask lesser questions, because we already know or have a good view of who the customer is. Connecting a lot of data through analytics to be able to give seamless onboarding, pre-approved sum assured or insta-insured that we call with a 3-click journey, easy policy for our term, wherein a lot of the fields can be pre-populated. So those sorts of ease of onboarding through the use of digital and analytics starts becoming a differentiator. Fourth is that overall the brand promise, the comfort that ultimately this is, when it's a moment of truth, the company will honor its promise of paying the claims. So we're finding that evolving, wherein, like I said, it's no longer just about the price of whatever it is that the person is trying to buy.
Got it. Thanks a lot.
Thanks.
Thank you. Request to the participants, please limit your questions. The next question is from the line of Prakash Kapadia from Moneyvade Portfolio Managers. Please go ahead.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity. I had 2 questions. If I look at the employee expenses, they are up 40% on a year-on-year basis. So is it some increment or any one-off in this quarter? And on a going forward basis, do we expect this 4.5 billion kind of run rate on employee expenses to continue? And on the VNB part, there is one negative item of change in assumption. What is that, if you could clarify that?
Yeah. So, as you're aware, last year, first quarter was definitely an outlier in terms of the times were very, very different. It was a full lockdown, and all of us were sure that there's a lot of uncertainty ahead of us. So all of us were very conservative. We were very conservative in terms of hiring. We were very conservative in terms of offering increments. So that is something that skewed the number in Q1 of the previous year. Since quarter two, as growth started coming back, we did mention that expenses will start to normalize, and that's what started happening. And since then, there has been a growth in every quarter, significant growth in every quarter, including quarter one of this year. So expenses have started normalizing. We've got into new partnerships. Spoke about some new partnerships that we have added now. We had added significant partnerships last year, like Yes Bank and SBI Caps. So, of course, we are looking at deepening our penetration in existing partners. So, large part of the hiring happens in sales at our partnerships, and it's more normalization in line with growth. And what do you see?
It's fair to assume this kind of a run rate should continue on a quarterly basis.
So you will see some sort of efficiencies that will come in with increase in productivities over a period of time. But as long as we continue to expand our distribution, we would continue to invest, as we mentioned in the past, both on digital as well as on human resources as and when required.
And this would have the impact of the increment also given this year.
Of course, yes, absolutely. So we, what we did last year, as things started to stabilize for a large part of the organization at junior levels, we gave increments from the second half of the year. And we do expect, hopefully, if the times continue to be stable, normalcy to be restored. Yes, and there would be increment impact in Q1 of this year. Yes, absolutely.
So, Neeraj, if I can add, one would be the increment, the other would be at a certain level and above. Last year we had not given bonuses, we had kind of not done that. So that will reflect.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So mid to senior level is also part of this.
Yes, so we were conservative. We had not, or rather we had reduced bonuses at senior levels last year. This time it has been more normalized given the way the year has ended.
Sorry to interrupt. May I request Mr. Prakash Kapadia to please rejoin the queue? We have participants waiting for their turn.
Yeah, it was just that question only. And secondly, on the VNB thing, that negative.
So the VNB assumptions that you're referring to is to do with the assumption changes that we do every time in the month of March. So this was assumptions change that we put through last quarter, and this is with regards to mortality variance and a little bit of persistency variance or assumptions changes that we put through last quarter. So that's what you're saying. We didn't put through anything this quarter.
Understood. Thank you. All the best.
Thank you.
Thank you. A request to the participants to please limit a question to one per participant. The next question is from the line of Udit Kariwala from Ambit Capital. Please go ahead.
Hi. Thank you. My question is, if I understood it correct, the 165 crores which was provided, last quarter was more keeping in view the claims which were already logged in with a lag, and hence that was the quantum. Is that understanding correct, given the explanation earlier on the call?
It was for deaths that may have already happened but may not have been reported in that period. So given what we were seeing, we did discuss earlier about looking at India mortality trends and looking at our own experience. So using that, we had looked at what claims could potentially come in from deaths that have not been informed to us yet. So largely it was that.
But then just other question was related to that, was then why take it as a part of operating assumptions, right? Because my whole point is, if you're taking a 700 crore incremental reserve at this point, which is subsequent to a operating assumption change in the last quarter, which effectively kind of points out that maybe the earlier assumptions were too aggressive. Is that the right way to look at it?
So, not really, Udit. See, the thing is, if you look at the VNB walk, or rather the EV walk, you look at right from the starting EV till the EVOP, all of it as such reflects what has happened to the EV from the beginning of the year at an operating level. Now, we had made certain assumptions at the beginning of the period. If you recollect, we had also strengthened the mortality assumptions from a long-term basis perspective. We had made this 165 crore of reserve in anticipation of claims that could come in future, and that's what we did refer to. We had settled X amount of claims in Q1, and our reserves were enough to meet all the claims that we actually settled, or all the claims that we recognized in the period. So this 700 crore is, we do believe that it is fairly peculiar to the times that we are in right now. On a long-term basis, whatever we thought we had to reflect in our assumptions, we did it at the beginning of the year with that 120 crore assumption strengthening. This is not what we believe is a ongoing, continuous, adverse mortality that we will expect for times to come. That's the reason why it's reflected as a one-time excess mortality reserve which we've created. But whichever way you look at it, as such, ignoring that one-time impact, you look at the EVOP, and then we've given you the impact of this one-time setup as well. So after that, it's about a 2% hit on the EV, which has been recognized in the P&L to the extent it belongs to other than par, and the hit is reflected in the embedded value as well.
But if I may just clarify one thing here, the 165 is not assumptions change. The assumption change is separate from this 165. So 165 is a one-off hit, if you like, to the P&L that you've taken. On top of that, we had an assumption change of 120 crores. The two different things that we did in the last quarter. And this year, when you are setting aside 700 crores, that is not assumptions change. It is again a one-off hit to the P&L. And assumptions, there are no new assumption change that we put through this quarter.
So we would put in an assumption change only if we believe it's a long-term trend that we should expect. Like if we expect something to deteriorate on an ongoing basis, then we would reflect it in the assumption change. But if there's something which is a one-time hit, we would recognize it as something which is different from what we had, what we are seeing on the ground.
Sorry to interrupt. May I request Mr. Udit Kariwala to please rejoin the queue, sir? Thank you. The next question is from the line of Nitin Agarwal from Motilal Oswal Securities. Please go ahead.
Yeah, hi. Good evening, everyone. So a couple of questions. Like, firstly, what has driven this slight increase in solvency ratio during the quarter, as despite like sharp rise in claims and creation of excess mortality reserve, the solvency ratio has still improved. So what has driven this?
Go ahead, Srini.
So solvency typically goes up every quarter. So this is, in spite of we setting up a reserve, because in the first quarter, as a normal basis, also we see the solvency going up because of new business strain being lower in the first quarter typically than the last quarter of the year. Plus also this year, because of the markets doing very well, our available solvency margin is also much higher than usual. So both these things combined as resulted in our solvency ratio being better than last March.
Okay. And secondly, if you can share some color on mix of claims across savings and protection line of business and the COVID claims in these line of businesses, and also any insights on the geographical distribution of these claims, as like wave 2 was far more deeper versus wave 1. So any particular geography or state which has driven more claims for us?
Primarily the western geography like Maharashtra, it sort of falls in line with the overall country level pattern that we've seen. So primarily Maharashtra, Gujarat, and that is also where our business concentration is also. So I think it falls well in line with the overall country level trends. So what was the other question, sorry? I had two questions.
Across these lines.
Sorry?
Mix of COVID claims across savings and protection line of business.
Right.
If you can.
So I think it also depends on the book that we've got. I mean, in terms of absolute rupee crores, if you look at the COVID claims alone, it is 40 crores on protection, and savings 120 crores on protection and 410 crores on savings.
Okay.
This includes, this is not this is the overall actual claims that we received. This includes what you would have normally expected to come through, plus whatever the funds, the customer own funds also included in it. But only standalone COVID, say, I don't know how much you can attribute to only COVID, given the cost of deaths being, a little bit unreliable. But COVID claims that we have received as COVID in our cost of death is only 115 crores on savings book and 40 crores on pure protection.
Okay, sure. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next question is from the line of Deepika Mundra from JP Morgan. Please go ahead.
Hi, thank you for taking my question. I just wanted to know on the distribution side, how is the strategy evolving now? Is there a greater push towards, let's say, getting the proprietary channels, for more nuanced customer selection? And on the banca side, given that you have added few more partners lately, what would be the mix between HDFC and newer partners?
Yeah, so hi, look, this is Suresh. So we have in any case decided that we will try and diversify our distribution and grow both irrespective. There's been a focus on the proprietary channel because our control in terms of the mix, the training, and what we can do with the agents and the financial consultants is probably a little bit higher. But having said that, look, we have very, very strong partnerships on banca, primarily led by HDFC Bank. A lot of new partners. So we have had SBI Cats, ISEC, Yes Bank, who have tied up with us. So we do expect their contribution to the overall business that we grow. So even if you were to estimate, us gaining a market share of anything between 30 to 50% over a period of time in the kind of banca that they do, it will be fairly significant, but may not significantly change our overall banca mix. But on the agency side, the runway is fairly high in terms of the kind of penetration and distribution depth that we can get across the country. Right? Banca is a little limited, but we grow with the way the banks are growing. So many of our banca partners, whether it's the small finance banks, whether it's Bandhan in the east, whether it's IDFC is another bank which is growing, along with the larger banks, who have been with us, are expanding their distribution base. So what we do find is that maybe the proprietary as a mix may not change dramatically. It will probably keep increasing, but our overall business will, keep increasing as we grow with the bank and agency. The good bit is that, look, in some sense, when, for instance, in Q1 of last year, when the agency and the direct business were under stress because our employees and the financial consultant partners couldn't go out to source, and we had themselves advised them not to venture out given the lockdown, the banks were open at their branches. So, we kind of got the upside on the bank, whereas the agency was low. This year, when some of the banks are going slow, the agency and direct businesses are now picking up again and being able to give us growth. So we will continue to focus on the proprietary channel. I think that is one area we've mentioned that we would like to grow, both on the online, the agency, as well as the direct business. But there's no reason why we would not want to ring fence and grow our market share and new partners on the distribution on the banca side.
Okay, got it. And Vibhas, I can ask, at the product level, are there any, how are the margins evolving with some of the tightening of the assumptions that have taken place a little bit last year? So across the savings and protection products, are the margins very similar to maybe a year ago, or is there margin dilution at the product level?
So I'll take this question.
Yeah.
So the last time, if you recall, there was a little bit of a disruption due to reinsurers changing the prices, and we were waiting for our products to be approved by the authority and all that. So this time it's a little more stabilized, and therefore you see margins of protection being slightly better than what we had last time. So the interest rates have gone up a little bit, and for insurance business, interest rates going up is always a good news because you can make a little bit of a spread. So therefore margins are fairly decent in both protection and non-par savings.
Got it. And if I can just, one last question. Last year or in 2021, in your VNB walk, you all had disclosed 400 odd bits expense impact, I guess was largely potentially due to the volumes dropping as well as maybe some protection pricing related. But we haven't seen a full reversal of that 400 bits expense impact in this quarter. So is it related to the employee expenses, etc., going up and reinstatement of incentives, etc., which was mentioned earlier on the call?
So I'll take that. If you look at our 2-year or our growth versus FY20, we are still marginally lower. So we haven't surpassed FY20. It's low single digits, but that's where we are. Had we surpassed that, this would have virtually been eliminated. So there's still a volume play that we need to get up. Yes, when you just look at for the quarter, you're seeing a 22% AP growth and 200+% CP growth and so on. So that's fueling the margins. But your question on just the expenses, that leverage will come in when we're able to wipe out versus 2 years back.
Got it. That's very clear. Thank you so much.
Thank you. The next question is from the line of Abhishek Saraf from Jefferies. Please go ahead.
Yeah, hi. Thanks for the opportunity. I just had a few questions on the reserving that we had done. So if you can just help me explain the 700 crores, would all of it have been expensed in the P&L as well? And is that one of the key reasons that our PAT has come down by around 30%? Secondly, on the EV walk, if I see there is a positive mortality variance, although it is very small, but still the direction-wise it's a bit, I'm not able to understand, given that we are actually making higher reserves on mortality, but yet we got a positive variance in the EV walk. If these two things, if you can help me explain, it will be very helpful.
Yeah, sure. So, I'm sorry, can you come back on your first one, please? I just...
I think that 700 crores that we have done,
right,
would have closed.
Right, so thanks for that. So, yeah, the 700 crore is basically the overall number, out of which PAR funds would be about 115, and other than PAR would be 585, and that is what is flowing through the shareholder P&L. All of it will be flowing through the combination of the revenue and the P&L as a change in reserves. So that's something that you will see at an overall level. Through the shareholder P&L, you will see the impact of 585. And what you see on the EV walk as a excess mortality reserve is pretty much that number adjusted for tax. The mortality variance that you're talking about is operating variance is not mortality, it is persistency and expense. The 0.7 billion that you see there is actually a positive variance on expense and persistency. Mortality, of course, given the situation, we've indicated what we've seen in this quarter as a separate in a separate column here as excess mortality, impact of the elevated mortality that we're seeing, which required us to create this reserve.
Sorry for belaboring on this, but just that in the notes on the EV walk, it's mentioned that mortality variance.
That is because, like I think Vibha alluded to at the start of the call, that of the 165 crores that we set aside, so there are some leftovers. So overall, strictly speaking, the mortality variance compared to what we had already set aside was actually not negative. I mean, it was very close to zero, but that's what you've seen in the footnote as 0.03. So we had enough money thanks to us setting aside 165 crores at the start of the quarter.
Okay, great. That helps me to clarify. Just one thing on the 700 crores. So what will be the period over which we think that this will be utilized? Like for 165, you said that probably we are looking at first quarter. So for the 700 crores, what is roughly the period that we are seeing to utilize it?
So it depends on the delay pattern that we would actually see, but this we believe would pan out over, say, July, August, September quarter largely, and a little bit spill over into OND quarter as well. So we believe it will be sufficient, and this bear in mind that this is in respect of the debts already taken place, and we're talking about only the delay in reporting to us. So it's not for new debts. New debts we have set aside a normal as a BAU. We do set aside reserves for normal sort of period debts to occur. That we are sufficient. This we are talking about only the extra debts in respect of what has already happened, what has already occurred in the A&J quarter.
The debts which have occurred, but for which we have not yet received claims, right? Is that a
correct. Because of the delay in the intimation, yes.
Many thanks for it. Just one last bit. So this 700 crores would not show up in VNB as such anyway of this quarter's VNB. We have not taken any. So this won't be showing up in our VNB as such, right?
No. This is not a new business. This is all debts in respect of the back book. So this won't affect the VNB.
Great. Thanks a lot, sir. Very helpful and very clear.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next question is from the line of Nischint Chawathe from Kotak Securities Limited. Please go ahead.
Yeah, hi. Am I audible?
Yeah.
Hi. This again, goes back to the 700 crore, reserve that is created. Somewhere you mentioned that the claims from the individual book have broadly stabilized, and we are sitting with this reserve at the end of the quarter. So can we say that most of the reserve that we are sitting on is for the group business?
No. I need to clarify. They have not yet stabilized. They are trending southwards as every day passes. They're trending southwards, but they are still elevated compared to pre-COVID.
Sure, but then will it be fair to say that since the obviously the understanding of or probably the knowledge of the group claims is still nascent, probably a larger part of this 700 crores would be for the group business?
It's possible.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, we are seeing this in a way. One might subsidize the other, but which one will subsidize which one? It's difficult to say. We might get a better sense maybe by mid-August. And there is a conservative overlay on top of it because we don't want to keep revisiting. With the only caveat that I think maybe Srini mentioned that we have not provided for wave 3. But for wave 2, hopefully, this should be sufficient for both. So to answer your question, is a little bit difficult to say because in the past also over the last 10 days, sometimes again just spiked up and then back down. So it's only about the 10 days of almost steady decline day after day. But it's reasonably a small time frame for us to base a hypothesis very, very convincingly to ourselves. And that's why I'm a little bit hesitant to say, yes, we are out of the woods and we have, a bigger part might be out of group. It might be a combination of both. So how long is the tail is really that $1 million question. And that's where we do have a hypothesis. But that we need to see that that's how it's panning out.
Sure, thanks. Just one more point is if you could give some guidance on the dividend payouts.
Also last part I just want to clarify is that this is something for debts that have already happened. That we are reasonably sure of. So the chunk of the debts during the peak that I talked about was the 3rd and 4th weeks of May. So that is in now kind of a runoff in terms of intimation. So that we are sure of that in terms of containment of the size of the problem. Yes, there will be further new deaths and so on, but that will start normalizing. But how many people have already died and what is still in the pipeline is really what we are trying to figure out.
One point on guidance on the dividend payouts.
Guidance. We don't give guidance, Nischint, but I think it will continue to be. This you're talking about next year. Because they and our AGM shareholders approved the payout of dividends. So, point the share.
Sure.
And it works out to close to a 30% payout ratio.
And that probably stays, is what one can say.
Whatever we do, it's really a smooth upward curve. So, or at yo-yoing of anything, all things remaining equal.
Perfect. Thank you very much and all the best.
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you. The next question is from the line of Ajok Frederick from BNK Securities. Please go ahead.
Thanks for the opportunity. I just have one question. On the gross claims versus net claims, I see that the retention is much more higher than what we observe in the annual report, where the retention is closer to 30%, sum assured being retained by us. So why is this gap coming in, and how should I read it?
So I think the net claims would be 956 crores versus a gross of 1598. I think I'm assuming that you are referring to that in the month of the first quarter of this year.
Yeah.
So typically the retention is lower in the case of say term products. Term products average sum assured for us is 90 lakhs, in which of which we retain 20 lakhs in the new business, but in the past we retained much lower amounts. Whereas the retention in the case of savings products is a little higher. We retain 30 lakhs. So I think it's a combination of what claims we receive, and our estimate or our experience is that during COVID, we have received a little bit higher proportion of, say, term insurance claims for the size of the book that we had. So therefore, you will see it does vary from quarter to quarter, and depending on what sort of claims we get in that quarter.
Thank you. The next question is from the line of Harshit Toshniwal from Premji Invest. Please go ahead.
Hi, thanks for the opportunity. The one thing, ma'am, so I agree that the COVID period is something which is challenging, but just want to understand that so we have not changed anything with respect to our mortality assumptions on the longer yields for the similar products. So we are factoring in the higher claims possibly this year or in the near term. But I just wanted to check that at this point of time, X of COVID, how the demand for protection has panned out. So I understand that due to the medical restrictions and all, conversions might be a little low, but in terms of inquiries and new requests, has that started inching up given this was a wake-up event? And wanted to know that, so no one knows about the third wave, but at some point of time you think that we'll have to again start being more optimistic about the entire book itself, and maybe possibly factor some of third wave when we price the product, because this is a good time to even pass on the price hikes on the reinsurance part. So how is the demand part looking and the pricing part on this term protection?
I'll take the demand part, Harshit, and then pricing Srini can cover. We definitely continue to see elevated levels of demand. And like I mentioned earlier, it's more a supply side constraint than a demand side, and more so with the second wave. Today, even when you just look at one data point, that in our bancassurance channel, maybe we end up converting about anything between 65-67%. So about 2/3 of what we get through the door is what ultimately we convert, or maybe even slightly lesser now, with absolutely little chance of people going in for a full medical. So there is clearly demand, and this is when people have paid their money and in their and logged in a proposal. So that is there. It will continue to be like this. Now, to your point about pricing, Srini, you want to take that in terms of if there's wave 3 and how do we...
Well, if I can just add on the first point, the first quarter of last year, there was a very elevated demand for term. We don't see the same level of elevation on term demand. It is probably normalizing now, which is there in place. So actually our term in this particular quarter, if you compare it to the last quarter, was at a time when everybody was trying to get a term policy and we hadn't fully understood the implications. So it's slowly when we started slowing down and reinsurers started tightening. But still we see a fairly high level of demand, both in terms of Google searches which is there online and in terms of the demand partners and our agents.
Harshit, you asked a question on mortality assumptions as well, right, on the back of this COVID?
Yeah, the question is that, so I understand that at this point of time, pricing any third wave is a very difficult aspect, but I'm saying that if there is a demand, and can't it be that we price an possibility of third wave in that pricing itself, because that's just a 1 year of additional mortality that we'll have to price in the assumption, then be more optimistic of the demand and start growing that book. I understand the risks, but I'm just saying that is it a good time to sell, because price hikes might be slightly easier to pass?
Yeah, so see, reinsurers were telling us, say, in March, April time, that they will soon come back to us with a price raise. But after having seen wave 2, they've again gone back to the drawing board, so they're yet to come back to us. But as far as COVID wave 3 is concerned, there is at least a belief that it may not be as lethal as the second wave has been, because of various reasons, maybe vaccination levels, oxygen cylinders, etc. But the current status is that the reinsurers who were supposed to come back to us with a sort of a stricter underwriting condition and possibly a price hike in April, they've gone back to the drawing board after seeing wave 2. So they've not come back to us. So maybe they'll come back with some level of price rise or maybe stricter underwriting norms. Then post that we will see. But this has been work in progress for the last 3-4 months now. Yes, if they do come up with a price rise, then we may have to pass it on to the customers. But we have few sort of tools around to manage the transition, as we did last time around. We can manage the transition this year as well.
Thank you. Participants are requested to please limit your questions to 2 per participant. Sorry for that. Participants are requested to please limit the question to 1 per participant. The next question is from the line of Sanket Godha from Spark Capital. Please go ahead.
Thanks for the opportunity. Just in the press release, we said that individual annuity business is 5% of the total business of individual AP, and in slide number 13 of the presentation, we say it is 6% of the total AP. So just wanted to understand the difference between both the numbers is basically the group annuity business, and if it is so, then just wanted to understand whether we have incrementally started focusing on the business or it was always the case, and wanted to understand the margin profiles of a group business compared to individual business. So individual annuity business. That's the first question I have.
The margin is the same for both individual or group, largely the same.
And the size of group annuity would be what percentage of individual annuity or any color you can give?
Now. It's growing.
Okay. And the second question was on credit protection. So just wanted to understand that whatever growth we have seen in 204% almost in first quarter, if you can give color with respect to the mix, whether how much is mortgage and MFI, because last year also we benefited because mortgages contribution was relatively higher compared to MFI, and also it supported margin. So are we seeing the similar kind of trend in the current quarter also, that mortgages are a little higher compared to MFIs, and therefore margins in credit protect is holding up better than what we anticipated?
Yes, that is the case, Sanket. The mortgage is indeed higher compared to the other segments.
Thank you. The next question is from the line of Eugene Yue from AR Capital. Please go ahead.
Great. Thanks so much for this. I just wanted to check on the company's view of the fintechs going forward. They provide quite a powerful channel for distribution. I just wanted to understand the management thinking on that, and what are the potential upsides potentially, partnering with more fintechs for distribution and using the underwriting engine that HDFC Life has. Thank you.
Yeah, hi. So, on the fintech side, We have been partnering. We have almost 50 such partners which are there across various types of, right from the telecom where we have something with Airtel. Similarly, we've been partnering with many of the other players in the financial services technology space. We continue to kind of look at how we can ease our journeys with the fintech partners in terms of being able to get pre-approved, in being able to get single or a 3-click kind of a journey, looking at how we can push each one of them on an animal space. The only thing is a lot of the fintech space is right now more towards the term where we have been cautious in some sense, but we do see being able to be going through this channel to reach out to in terms of diversified geography also on the savings side. So we are looking at products which could be simplified. The whole journey by itself can be simplified, and then we will look at how do we expand. On the term side, I think we are being a little cautious with some of our relationships right now.
Got that. Thank you.
Thank you. The next question is from the line of Madhukar Ladha from Elara Capital. Please go ahead.
Hi, good evening, and thank you for taking my question. First, I noticed that the net new investment flow is negative at about 100 crores in this quarter. So, I wanted to understand what could this be attributed to? Is it more because of surrenders in ULIPs, or is it more because of COVID or some other sort of cohort maturing? Some light on that will be helpful.
It is indeed attributed to ULIP surrender. While as you can see, the investment income as well as the market movements have been positive, but this can be attributed to ULIP surrender.
So one point I want to add here is typically in the first quarter, given that first quarter is usually the lowest in terms of acceleration towards growth, but your fixed costs remain what they are. Your addition and accretion to your AUM is the lowest. Last year, it artificially looked like it was higher because of very, very low surrenders, just given the pandemic. People were just not able to get to the branches, and we ourselves, for people to get trained on how to use digital and so on, it took some time. And so you see that catch up, but it's really last year that is more an aberration.
Thank you. The next question is from the line of Mayank Pukrediwala from Franklin Templeton. Please go ahead.
Hey, hi, Veda. Thanks for taking my question. The two questions. One is if you could break down your retail protection, which was flat, between, say, sum assured and pricing, or volume, number of policies and pricing. And second, in your VNB walk, from Q1 of last year to Q1 of this year, you've taken a very small positive impact on cost. But your cost growth versus Q1 of last year is substantially higher. So I just needed to understand whether we smoothen the cost when we calculate quarterly VNBs, or we take the entire cost of that quarter into the VNB.
So I'll answer the second one. It's a simple one. We take actual cost. Whatever we've incurred, we take it. There is no smoothing. We've never done that. So that is just what you incur. Neeraj, you want to take the question on protection?
Yeah, sure. Mayank, so specifically, what is that you wanted to understand in segments within that?
No, just the retail protection, which is flat YOY. But if you could break it up between how much was it pricing and how much was it volume?
Right. So what we did mention is that we have been reasonably conservative in terms of writing continues to be a fairly significant part of our mix. The average sum assured in the term business has increased. People are looking to buy more limited pay. That is something that has definitely been the case. On the policy side, we've been in a situation where the demand has far exceeded the ability to kind of fulfill the entire process. So for every 100 cases that come in, we're able to fulfill about 60 odd, and the rest is basically either in process, or we need more information, or we need the customer to undertake medical exams, as we discussed earlier in the call. So that's where on a base of 50% growth last year, we are kind of a little under about -3 or 4%. So it's very similar to last year's the level before that, and it's largely on account of the prices, or rather the average ticket size is going up. Some repricing is something that had happened compared to same quarter last year. Some part of it would be that as well.
Got it. Just if I could slip in one more question, which is, our reinsurer has potentially paid something like 600 crores this quarter, and the premiums that they receive from us is relatively much lower. So their losses are huge. So do you see the risk of that industry or the reinsurance industry in India getting consolidated between a couple of players? I don't think do you expect a large or some of the fringe reinsurers to bear these kind of losses and still stay put in the market?
So, Mayank, again, it has been a tough market. Things have been difficult for everyone in general. Reinsurers have taken a view in terms of how they want to approach the market. So some of them are recalibrating how they want to look at this, and it'll probably take some time for them to come back with how they're thinking about this long-term perspective. The short-term definitely is affecting some of the thought processes, but we'll have to wait and see. Anyway, globally, even in good times, we have about 4 or 5 large global reinsurers, and all of them were or are operating in India. Some of them have maybe decided to take a bit of they've taken a bit of a pause, and I guess they'll think about how they want to operate. Yeah, but so your point is kind of valid, that some of them have decided to just think this through a bit more, and we will see how that goes. So at this point in time, everyone is looking at tightening the ship up front rather than worrying about claims coming through later.
Yeah, so my broader question was that, that there is a potential issue around, capital from the reinsurance side, or the lack of capital to support insurance growth in India. How long do you think it might take for those issues to go away before, some of these supply issues go away and all of that?
Mayank, what you have to think about is in terms of is it still a long-term opportunity in India? We all believe the answer is yes. Will we have to be patient to ride this wave out? Of course, we will have to. So as long as people are able to be responsible in terms of the way they price, the way they underwrite, and then are able to live with the experience that will come through, it will work out. But yeah, in the short term, there could be these supply side considerations are for real. There's no getting away from that, and that's the reason why we believe that the growth in this segment has to be more calibrated rather than something which we cannot handle as an industry.
Got it. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, this was the last question for today. I would now like to hand over the conference to Ms. Vibha Padalkar for closing comments.
Thank you. Before I wrap up, my team has pointed out that there might have been an error in my mentioning the NBM. For sake of clarity, want to reiterate that for the quarter it's 26.2%. Thank you all for the participation today. Stay safe, and if there are any further questions, please do reach out to our investor relations team. Thank you and good night.
Thank you. On behalf of HDFC Life Insurance Company Limited, that concludes this conference. Thank you for joining us, and you may now disconnect your lines.